Okay, Jesse, just a quick recap from our session, mate. So to start from the very beginning, what sort of ball flight were we observing, right? Um, a push, not quite a hook, but certainly a ball that overcurves, right? Overcurves to the left, right? So if I do this in green, we're observing a push. We're observing a ball that overcurves, and we're also observing very clean shots as well, aren't we? Right, kind of just catching it off the ground, very clean, just picking it off the ground. So if we go just before impact and see kind of what the club's doing through the shot, you can see it through impact. You can see, well, the club head's approaching the ball way too far from the inside, right? So how would we orient our thinking based on those shot patterns? Well, the push is going to come from the path being too far from the inside, right? Too much into out. You can see that there. Too much from the inside, too into out. The hook is going to come from the face to path relationship, right? So if you're coming from the inside like that and the club face is square, you're going to hit those big pushes. If the club face is turning over, so the club face is closing too much, and we know that it does because you're not turning well enough with your upper body, the face is going to whip over, your right hand's going to whip over, and then you start to get that ball that overcurves. So we've got two things so far to work on. Working on path, and we're working on face to path relationship, right? And then the clean shot comes from a bit of low point, right? So you can see just before impact there, you can see just how low this club head is, and you're 6 inches before the ball, right? So we definitely have a low point issue. So that would so if we improve our low point, that will get rid of the thin shot as well, right? So let's go back to the beginning and start talking about the things that we went over, right? Just as I'm not going to go through it all intensely. I'm just going to give you a little recap, right? So they're the shot patterns that we observed. How are we gonna think about it, right? Well, we know we've got 3 issues. We've got a path issue, we've got a face to path relationship issue, and we've got a low point issue. So then we're looking at how we're moving from the start to finish, right? So straight away, the club head is a little bit on the low side, right? Not that that's a bad thing, right? The hands move inward nicely, but even in that takeaway, if you watch your head's already starting to dip down, right? And then as we can, but saying that, hands are moved inward nicely, right? Going back, halfway back, the club and your hands are kind of going through the base of your right bicep, which is, the pattern you see with most of the pros on tour. As you carry on there, if you keep watching your head carries on moving downward, right? Hands are in a nice position at the top, right? Just behind your right shoulder, right? Left arm's in a nice position. So we know from just looking down the line that our heads move down a lot, right? And then as we start down, you kind of move down, your spine kind of flexes forward. We know that's how it works. And then as we start down, one of the things that we were talking about, and if I do this in green, right, and we follow the butt end of the club, the path of the butt end of the club, right, you can see your butt end actually comes down, so it kind of goes up those lines and then comes down those lines, right? So the path of the hands is coming down too low, right? And then as you come down, the club gets underneath the plane a lot. As we're observing as we're observing the turns, right? Hips are a little bit closed at that point at P5. Shoulders are a little bit closed at P6. By that I mean just pointing off to the right. And then at impact, get rid of that green arrow, kind of out the way enough with the hips, right? I'd like to see you a bit more. I'd like to see a bit more of your left butt cheek, right? Which I'll show you the drill you were doing in a second. But you know, shoulders now are kind of back to zero, right? Kind of back to where they were at the start. Whereas you see the pros there, they generally turned out of the way, right? So not turning enough. And then as you come through there your right hand whips over, the hands kind of, and you know, we did this when we analysed it, right? We said, right, well, there's P6 with your hands. The pros from P6 start moving the hands left from P6. So the hands are moving left, and starting to turn the corner as the club's hitting the ball. Well, your hands are still going out, look. You see your hands are still going outward this way. Right, and then through the sharp post impact, kind of straight and out. Right, you see the pros, they're turning the corner at this point, they're turning round here. Right, and then the exit point's too high, club's coming through your left shoulder, face whipped over, look like we expect. So shaft and hands coming through your left shoulder, which is too high. So then if we look at it from the face on view, right, we know that your head's coming down too much, but then it's really well. The one thing we spoke about from the face on view as well, right, was just looking at it from setup. You know, if we draw a line down from your center of your shoulders, center of your hips, right. You know, the one thing we pointed out from there was that the center of your shoulders is too much towards your right foot, right? So your upper body, I mean, you've got some right tilt, right? We know that, right? So there's your right tilt, a little bit in your setup, which is what we want. But we need your center of your shoulders more this way. We need the center of your shoulders more in the middle of your stance, and then your hips just a little bit closer to your left foot. Okay. So that's the best way to think about that. And I'll show you what we did in a second, how we changed that. But then, you know, as you go back, you know, the big thing we picked out was just how much your head's moving, right? Head's moving down and to the right, which then gets your spine angle there, right? Which just tells me you're still in forward flex in your backswing. Simple as that. Right, the mass of your upper body has moved even more over your right foot, right, even more over your right foot. And then as you start down, right, good movement with your lower body, but you can see just how your head is just still too far to the right, right. So you come down, we're not turning hard enough. The hands aren't forward enough on the circle, so your hands aren't over your right thigh, which is where we want them at that point, right? So then it causes you to come underneath the plane a little bit, right? So how would we, what are the things that we decided, that we were going to work on, right? Well, the first one was we need to extend more. Right, so if I get this up, and you know the key, because you're moving your head down and to the right. Oops. The key is for you to think you're moving your head up and to the left, right, which is the opposite, right? You do the opposite of what your pattern is. And the feeling of you moving your head up and to the left actually keeps it dead center, right? So that's a much better sort of backswing. Now you've extended your spine more. this back at the back of your spine there is kind of vertical, which just tells me you've moved back up to 0. If you flex forward 40 degrees with your spine, you've got to extend it back up to 0. So you're extending 40 degrees to get to the top of the swing. That's the pattern. That's just the patterns you see with the pros, right? So, if we pull up, we pulled up a few pros, didn't we, when we were talking about this? Right. So that's what we want. That's what we want. That's really good, right? So the head moving up and left is gonna take care of the extension bit, right? That's gonna take care of the extension bit. Downswing, we want to open the turns more. So let's get your old swing up there, and let's get your new swing up here, right? So if we get those lines up again, right? And let's not forget the one thing we were talking about was hand path, right? You see the pros, not all of them, and this is kind of, where some people will jump in and say, oh well, this guy doesn't do it like that. Well, he's maybe 1 out of 100, 1 out of 200, right? The general pattern you see with the pros is that they get up to the top, and then their handle, the butt of the club, or their hands, whatever you want to describe it, goes up on that line, but then comes down a little bit more over the top, right? So they go up, the hands and the club kind of go up through the base of the right bicep, right, sort of here, and then it comes down, sort of down here, right, sort of a little bit more over the top, right. I think we used Hogan for that example, didn't we? Let me just find Hogan, 1 second. Right. Oops. So there, 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 there. Right, so it goes up that line, comes down that line, right? And you could pull up 100 pros. The vast majority of them are going to follow that same sort of pattern with the handle, right? With the handle. So what we did was we said, but where's that drill? So we said, right, well, we said, if you start pulling with your left shoulder, right, and you start to open your turns more, you're a little bit more aggressive with your turns, right? We stop you there. That's your old swing. That's your swing at the start of the session. And we start to open your turns more, right? That in itself will bring the handle more down this way instead of bringing the handle straight down and getting the club underneath the plane, right? So all I'm doing is I'm hanging on to the club there. I'm holding it. I'm saying turn, 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 turn. Towards the end of the session, we got a T-peg under your armpit, didn't we? And you were pulling with the T-peg, right? But you can see what's happening here, right? Because you're bringing the club down with the pulling of your body. Watch the direction. Watch the direction that your hands are going now. Right? There you go. So that's your feeling. That's your drill. Right? So you look at where you are there compared to where you are on the left, where your shoulders are still pointing off to the right. Now you've actually turned your shoulder. You've still kept the club head behind your hands, right? But you've turned your shoulders and your hips. I can see more of your left butt cheek, but your shoulders. We only want your shoulders back to about 0 at that point, right? To exaggerate it, you've got your shoulders pointing to the left, hips are pointing to the left, open. So the idea is to get them open at P6 while still keeping the club head behind your hands. Right, that's our drill, that's our feeling, right? That's the pattern we want to try and get into, right? So then we pulled up some other pros, and we and you start talking about this guy, Alex Noren, right? Won a few times on the European Tour, European Ryder Cup player, and you look at the drills he's doing, right? So it's kind of similar, right? You look at where he's at P6, his shoulders are open, his hips are open, the club head is still behind his hands, right? Gets to there and then look at what he's feeling through impact, right? So that's kind of our drill with regards to building up the muscle memory, burning it in, right? And then let me just get your next video, 1 second. So then kind of a little bit later on in the session, right, this is you doing the drill, getting up there, turning, getting down to P6, right? We did a lot of drills where we stop in there, but now we're just carrying it on, right? And the key thing is you look at where your hands are there at P6. Now your hands are starting to turn the corner, look. So your hands are starting to exit left more, club much more underneath the plane, face not rotated over, so you're going to eliminate that hook, right? That's really good. That's really good. And then you swing towards the end of the session, maybe get that one up here, and get your swing at the start of the session up there, right? We'll maybe use exit point as a before and after, right? So I mean, you know, the thing is, you know, you're still kind of dropping your hands down, not quite enough turn with the shoulder. So you know, the key points, we ended up kind of the last half an hour of the session, we ended up coming up with a few key sort of points, didn't we? Right? It's kind of the Axeman move to get up to the top, to extend, right? The trigger is that for your head to move up and left. It doesn't, but it's the opposite to your pattern. So you've got to try and do the opposite of your pattern just to get out of your pattern, right? So that was that kind of took care of the extension up to the top. As you get up to the top, we want to settle into that lead foot, right? It's the lead foot pushing down, really kind of putting maximum pressure under your left foot as you start down. And then it's kind of like we use the T-peg under the armpit drill, and it's just pulling that T-peg round to get more turn, right? In fact, let's do it. Let's measure it with some lines. So before swing on the left, old swing on the right. You know, if we stop you at P6, there, right, stop you at P6, there, right, so considerably different, right? Look how higher, well, I mean, let's use the club head, right? So the club head now is only just fractionally underneath the plane on the right side, right? You look at the turns, right? You look at shoulder. It's like, I can't see your left shoulder now. It's kind of almost at zero. This one, your shoulders are pointing off to the right too much, right? So obviously from here, you're not going to be attacking the ball so far from the inside. You look at just before impact, that club's just underneath the red line. You look at just before impact there, it's well underneath the red line, right? So the path's going to be much better. You can see through impact if we use a little circle for your hand path from 6, right? You can see your hands are still going down and out, right, to hit it. Now your hands are, well, still going a little straight through impact, aren't they? Right, but now they're starting to exit more, right? You look at the position of your right arm. So your right arm's out here. Now your right arm's at least straight, right? We still want it inward more, so we want your hands moving from 6. You want your hands moving round, turning the corner more. But even those little changes, right, gets the club coming out underneath your left shoulder, whereas before it was coming out kind of through your left shoulder, above your left shoulder. Club face whipped over, club face hasn't whipped over. Right, so even though it's not perfect, it's not quite like a professional standard yet, but it's considerably different, mate. Considerably different. You've just got to work on it a little bit more, ingrain these new movement patterns, and you'll be fine. You'll be fine. So just in summation, we're working on extending more to get up to the top. More extension, head moves up and left, that's your drill. Transition, and the best one for that would be that drill, right? So I kind of held on to it. I said, right, now push down with your left foot, start turning your hips, but as you're doing that, start pulling your left shoulder as well, right? So you're pulling your left shoulder, which turns your shoulders more, so you're opening your turns harder. And you can see what that does. It's actually pulling me along for the ride. Your handle and the hands come down that way instead of kind of down vertical too much. Right, so it's opening, the hands move out more, and you're going to do that by pulling your left shoulder and opening your turns more to get you down into impact, with the path not coming so far from the inside. Okay, mate. Any questions, by all means, just shoot me over an email. Cheers.